The wolf is a fierce predator that strikes fear into the hearts of both its prey and those who encounter it. Their powerful jaws, sharp teeth, and fearless aggression make them a formidable opponent for any prey that crosses their path. But what happens when humans find themselves in the crosshairs of these deadly creatures? Hit that like button and subscribe right now. In this episode, we tell the terrifying true story of one of the worst wolf attacks ever recorded. A group of young boys who find themselves fighting for their lives after being brutally mauled by a lone wolf. Welcome to Final Affliction. The Tsuninsky district can be found in southwest Russia in the Republic of Dagestan, right on the border of Georgia. It is a small district, only 1,300 square kilometers in area, with a population of around 20,000 people. Although there may not be many people here, the sense of community is always strong in smaller towns, and their connection to the rugged landscape around them is very strong. With tall, snow-capped mountains and lush green fields, the diversity of wildlife found here is impressive, but sometimes the animals of the forest will venture out into the world of humans, and when this happens, something will always go wrong. On July 28, 2022, 3 young boys decided to enter the forest near to their house together. Aged between 7 and 9, the children were friends at school and loved to go on adventures together, climbing rocks and swimming in the nearby river on the forest's edge. As they were free from the confines of school for the summer, and the weather was particularly nice, they decided to head to the river together for a day of swimming. Despite their age, they knew the area pretty well and easily traveled across the countryside to get to their favorite swimming spot. Their mothers had always warned them of what might lurk inside the forest, telling them the tales of little boys being taken into the woods to be eaten by hungry wolves. The boys were always on the lookout, just in case they were to become another story. After checking their surroundings, they decided that they were alone and jumped into the water. They spent the next few hours swimming up and down the backwaters of the river, splashing and racing each other in their very own natural water park. As the day continued, the boys began to get a little tired and sat on the edge of the river, dipping their toes in the water to cool off. They chatted together about school starting and their families, telling jokes to each other that they heard from the adults. All of a sudden, they were interrupted by a rustling sound behind them. It was very quiet, and they had no idea how long it may have been happening, for as the rush of the water overpowered most of the sounds around them. Thinking about the stories of their mothers, they began to look around for any wild animals that may be watching them from the forest, but they couldn't spot anything. Despite not seeing anything through the bushes, they still felt uneasy and decided it would be best to go home, just to be safe. Suddenly, one of the boys shouted out as he spotted the yellow eyes of a wolf emerging from the darkness. The boys screamed in terror as a 150-pound gray wolf jumped from the bushes, snarling at them as it decided its next move. These children had been taught what to do when faced with a wolf. They knew to make themselves big and back away, never turning your back on the animal. Unfortunately, they were young and frightened. Everything that they knew was forgotten in the fear of the moment, replaced with the feeling that they needed to escape the area immediately. They turned and began to sprint away, which only fueled the wolf into a chase, as it now viewed them as prey and knew it would be able to take them down with ease. Within seconds, the fierce wolf bit down on the youngest boy's leg and pulled him to the ground. It gripped him with sharp teeth, digging into his tiny leg, and tore a section from his body. The boy screamed out in pain as blood began to flow from his thigh. The boy struggled to crawl away, but the wolf had other plans as it pounced onto his back and dug its teeth into his neck. Panicking, the boy began to grab the animal's snout and push it away from him, but the predator easily overpowered him. Suddenly, the boy felt the animal flinch as it let out a loud yelp in pain. With his face in the dirt, he tried to look around to see what was happening. And that's when he saw his friend, the eldest of the group, throwing rocks at the animal biting down on his neck. He felt its grip loosen, and he began to pull himself from under the wolf as it turned to face the 9-year-old boy instead. Although he was severely injured from the attack and completely covered in his own blood, he was aware enough to know his friend had just saved his life. However, the wolf wasn't finished, and now he was mad. The wolf pounced from one boy to the other, knocking over the 9-year-old with little resistance. The boy screamed out, but it was short-lived, as the animal grabbed him by the throat to silence him. As the youngest boy watched the wolf mauling his friend, he noticed that his other friend was nowhere to be seen. He knew this meant that he must have escaped and would soon bring help to save them both. As the wolf gripped on his friend's neck, the youngest boy watched in terror as his friend's struggles slowly came to an end. His lifeless body was now face down in the dirt as the wolf continued to maul him, knowing that it would soon start eating him. The massive animal lifted up his friend by his neck, dragging its limp body beneath him as it disappeared into the forest. As the young boy watched his friend get taken away, he slowly lost consciousness and fell back into the blood-soaked dirt. Meanwhile, the boy who had escaped the deadly attack was sprinting through the forest as fast as he could. He could hear his friends screaming in the distance, and although he wished he could help them, the fear of becoming the next victim only fueled him to run faster. After a few minutes, he made it back to his house and crashed through the door to the surprise of his parents. He quickly explained what he had seen and how his friends were in grave danger as they listened in dismay. They immediately phoned for the emergency services, and soon police and paramedics were dispatched to the wooded area. As they arrived, the woods were quiet, and they were initially unable to find the exact location of the attack. After hours of combing through the forest, they finally made the horrifying discovery. The youngest boy was face down, unconscious, with a large gaping hole in the side of his neck, which was slowly oozing blood into the ground around him. He was very pale and his breathing was shaking. They knew they didn't have long to save this boy. As they removed the boy from the scene, they realized there was no sign of the 9-year-old and knew that they needed to widen their search if they had any chance of finding him. The men ventured further into the forest, spreading out along all the edges. Locals from the town joined in on the search after hearing of the attack, and eventually the entire town came together to find the lost child. It took some time before they finally came across the boy on the far edge of the forest. He had been dragged for many miles, and his tiny body was destroyed, ripped apart by the animal, who consumed him as a meal. They couldn't see any sign of the wolf nearby, but needed to find him fast. They feared that after tasting human flesh, the wolf would begin looking for more. The last thing they wanted was for more children to be attacked and eaten by this ferocious predator. They gathered the remains of the oldest boy and delivered him to his grieving parents, distraught that they had just lost their only son in such a vicious attack. While the family and town were grieving the death of the boy, the youngest boy from the attack was transferred to a local hospital attempting to save his life. Initially, he was in a small hospital, but it was determined that his injuries required a more modern treatment plan and was transferred to Makhachkala, the capital of the region. It was there he was saved. His wounds were cleaned and repaired, stabilizing his condition. He was in intensive care for months, and after numerous operations, he was finally able to return home to his grateful parents. Thankfully, the boy survived, but he will never be able to forget the day he saw his friend getting brutally mauled in front of his eyes, struggling to resist as he met his unfortunate final affliction.